Happy Friday, everybody. There are a lot of misunderstandings regarding the tariffs cases that have just come down in the last couple of days. So let me clarify. We have two tariffs cases that we're dealing with right now. The first one is VOS, and it can also be the Oregon case. There's about a dozen states. In that case, a motion for summary judgment was granted, saying that the emergency piece of law that the administration was using to justify their tariffs was not appropriate, that the executive branch doesn't have that kind of reach when it comes to tariffs, that they are interfering with the powers of Article 1 for Congress. So that motion for summary judgment has been granted, and that knocks out 4 executive orders regarding this emergency and this tariff situation. After that decision came out, immediately the administration filed a motion for a stay, meaning they asked for the proceedings to be stopped, to be halted, paused. They asked that of the court making the decision, and they also asked that of the Court of Appeals. Now, procedurally, if you're asking for a stay of your case in order to appeal, you ask the court that has done the final decision or whatever order it is you're trying to appeal, right? So we've got the U.S. Court of International Trade that granted the summary judgment. That's the one that needs to agree to stay or pause the proceedings while the appeal goes forward. Now, because the administration decided to file both in the lower court and the Court of Appeals, the Court of Appeals said, well, we don't know what the U.S. Court of International Trade wants to do here because it's only been like less than 24 hours. So let's pause everything because we want to see what the lower court decides on this idea of staying the proceedings while you are appealing. Now, some people are saying, well, this puts the tariffs back into place and so on and so forth. That's not really it. This is a procedural issue that's going on, and it just is simply, let's keep things as they are until we figure out whether or not we want to pause everything as it goes through the appellate process. This is pretty typical. What's not necessarily typical is filing in both courts at the same time. Now, the lower court then has put out a request for plaintiffs to file a brief by June 2nd, letting them know what they think about staying the proceedings in that lower court. The Court of Appeals has consolidated all of the cases together to make it easier to brief and also set out a briefing schedule regarding what we want to do regarding the stay for both the plaintiffs and the defendants, which is, again, very normal. So in the interim, until they decide to actually stay the case, the lower court that granted the motion for summary judgment, everything is paused because procedurally we got to kind of get things untangled here. So this wasn't okay, tariffs are done, now they're back, tariffs are done, now they're back. No, this is a whoa. The system works a lot slower than this, so we're going to need everyone to just kind of calm down. So right now, we're waiting on the plaintiffs to file their brief on whether or not they want to have the proceedings paused while it goes through the appellate process. And the U.S. Court of International Trade is the one that needs to make that decision. And apparently, if they're dragging their feet too much, then the Court of Appeals said, all right, well, you can go ahead and file with us too. We'll kind of do this maybe a little bit at the same time, but we'd prefer to have the lower court's decision before we go forward with anything that we're doing here. So that's the first case. The motion for summary judgment was granted. Those executive orders have been deemed unlawful, unconstitutional. Now the question is, well, are we going to pause all the proceedings while we go to the appellate process, or are we going to let that order take control as we go through the appellate process? Now, the second case that was decided regarding tariffs was the learning resources case, and that was out of the DC court. All right, so we had international trade, and now we've got the DC court. The DC court went through and decided to put a preliminary injunction in place on the tariffs, meaning everybody needs to stop because we went through the factors to determine whether or not a preliminary injunction was appropriate. We decided, yes, it is. So stop everything that's going on while we go through and litigate the actual issue. This is not a final judgment. The prior case was a final judgment. This is not. This is a preliminary injunction like most of the cases cases against the administration. So with that preliminary injunction in place, of course, the administration is appealing that injunction. So you might say, well, the injunction is in place, so the tariffs have to be paused. But the court said in DC, let's wait a couple of weeks here. Why? Probably because they knew the preliminary injunction was going to be appealed by the administration. So we're in kind of a wait and see moment, and that's not because anybody did anything wrong, or because of one ideology versus the other, or because the tariffs are deemed okay or not okay. It's just simply because this is how the legal process works. Unfortunately, it takes time, and every single step has to be followed appropriately, because I think, as we all know, these cases are going to be appealed until they can't be appealed anymore. And that means that all of our judges in all of these cases need to make sure that everything they do is exactly right, so that when it hits that top court, they can't look back and catch them up on a technicality in the procedural rules.